When you think about savvy influencers in the tech sector that also happen to be women, my next guest absolutely makes any influencer list of consequence. But why? Well, could it be that she wrote her first computer game at age 10? She's been playing with computers since she was 4. We're going to ask Tara Hunt, aka Miss Rogue, that very thing and many more things that we can get her to expand on. I'm your host, Walter Schwabe, and this is episode 9 of the fusedlogic podcast. When you're done listening to this week's episode, please head to newbeginningsmexico.org and make a $20 donation to feed a family for a day so they don't have to go to the Puerto Vallarta City dump and dig through garbage bags to eat instead. Thank you in advance for making that donation. Miss Rogue, Tara Hunt, welcome to the Fused Logic podcast.
Thank you for having me, Walter.
So, out in sunny Toronto, Ontario, Canada today, here in Alberta, in Edmonton, minus 21, snowing. What's it like over there?
It's sunny, but it is like minus 6, I do believe, right now. So it's not balmy. It's still winter. We have lots of snow.
We'd be happy to share about 10 of our minus degrees with you, if you'd like.
Yeah, that's all right. You can keep them. That's all right.
So, you and I met in South by Southwest Interactive down in Austin, Texas. I think it was 2010. It could have been 2009. I'm sorry, I'm getting old and it's a little blurry. But I think it was around there. And the Woofy Factor had just come out. You had just published that in 2009. And it was, have I got my dates right? Am I somewhere in the ballpark?
Yeah, you're absolutely in the right year. Absolutely, 2009.
So you've written more than just the Woofy Factor, but if you don't mind, I'd like to ask you a little bit about that book. It's been a while since I've actually, and full disclosure, it has been a little while since I picked it up, Tara. And but I loved the book, and so I want to ask you: Do people understand and respect the idea of social capital more or less today?
Oh, it's a good question. I feel like even though the book was published in 2009, so that's almost 8 years ago, we're finally getting to the point, I think, that people, brands, agencies, consultants, everybody that sort of interacts with the digital marketing, the social space, is finally coming around to understanding the impact of social capital, but still can't really, they still don't really understand how it works and how to operate within that mind frame. So, it's funny, like the Woofy Factor is so old, but I feel like it's still relevant in so many ways. I think all of the examples are outdated, but the core principles are still very, very relevant and lessons that many brands that I see still need to learn.
Possibly even more relevant now that, the web has evolved so much, it's grown so much since 2009. I mean, when I think about social capital, just yesterday, I was informed by a client that their quote unquote social media person was holding their Twitter account hostage. They wouldn't give it up in terms of logins because they felt like they weren't, they were upset that they were going to lose the gig. So they, they were kind of in a huff, right? She was just like, I'm not going to give this to you. And so what she doesn't realize is, first of all, this country is a small country as it relates to social media influencers, digital influencers. The city I live in, which is smaller than the one you're in, is even smaller in terms of a community of that sort. And if you are out there slinging tweets on behalf of another brand and you pull something like this, if that was to ever make the light of day, for example, your credibility, your social capital would be shot. And so, nobody would trust you anymore with that responsibility because, as you know very well, being the digital influencer you are, and basically the person who sets the strategy for a lot of the projects that you're on, as I imagine, I'd love to get into, that you have to have a ton of trust because you carry that brand forward when you take over, that responsibility. And so, I mean, social capital is so critical, and you can lose it, as you know, with a single tweet or a single post. When you think about brands warming up to the idea of social capital and trying to invest in building that out, what are some of the barriers do you think that they commonly have to overcome?
Well, first of all, just to take a step back from even social media, social capital, and as you're alluding to with the example that you're giving, is more than just the tweets or the Twitter account or any social media platform that is out there. It's all of the things that can't be easily measured as well in online channels, and I think a lot of people forget that as well. So, I found that quite often a lot of the most damaging to a brand social capital is the whispers that happen offline or in not measurable public spaces, right? So sometimes the silence that follows a non-newsworthy YouTube video or such things is actually speaks more volumes for measuring social capital than just counting likes and views and retweets and all that stuff that marketers tend to glom onto. So, in the case that you brought up with this social media practitioner holding hostage of the Twitter account, well, it's these are sort of rumors that are going to fly on behind the scenes, right? Not necessarily people talking publicly about it, but her reputation getting out and about through the networks, and her wondering down the months and years down the road why she isn't getting that job, right? And it's all to do with social capital. So social capital, as I say in the Woofy Factor, back when existed long before the web. It's just now we can kind of see how it operates, and that it is utterly important to think about social capital, or Woofy, as the currency of the web. So it actually, if you have, if you're nice, people like you, you're networked, you're notable, you're cool, people will talk about you more on social networks. That is also a result of social capital. So, it makes it like a very ephemeral, as you are indicating, thing, so that if you do something offline that people aren't happy with, they stop talking about you, and your score, I guess, whether you can actually nail it down with metrics, drops as a brand.
I think you're absolutely correct. I think there's a couple of things I want to mention there. One, I went through an angry period. Back in 2011, I had just a catastrophic year in my personal life, and actually also my business life. And I had a very difficult time coming through that. And I think that I eroded a lot of my personal social capital and even my corporate at the time, just because of where I was in life. And so I pay less attention to, the vanity numbers. And so whether, honestly, a whole lot of people like me per se right now. Having said that, my primary focus in life is to be as valuable as I possibly can with, say, something like this podcast, and bringing folks like you on to share as much of your wisdom as we can pry out of you in 30 minutes or so. But I think you're right. It's that that whisper that you can't quantify, you can't track, but it happens. And it's been going on for, I mean, it's not well before the internet was around. That's how the buzz happened, right? It was happening at the coffee shop or the quote unquote water cooler. So now the water cooler has an amplified microphone beside it. So let's.
I just want to jump in, just like here's an interesting example of how this operates. So there are several firms out there that they do reputation management.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've heard about them,
yeah.
but either they'll wipe any sort of bad stuff about you off of Google searches, or they'll try to create all sorts of good buzz about you online.
Right.
And for like for somebody who's never heard of you or isn't connected into networks that are connected to you, just doing a Google search or just going on Twitter or going on Cloud or whatever and seeing a score or a follower base is going to be impressed. But once they start digging deeper into it, they start talking to actual real people about, whether or not you're trustworthy, they're going to get a very different picture and you can't ever reputation erase that picture.
No, that's right. Exactly. And so the rule, I'm sure you would agree, is just to own it.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, don't be, I think the rule on the web, and I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on your podcast, but it's like, don't be a dick. You're fine, right? Like, that is the core to it, is like, you know what? If you want a good reputation, like, be a good community member. And that's sort of always been the core to reputation management, right? Like, get ahead of it as well. So a lot of brands, everybody makes mistakes from time and time again, but you're more willing to forgive a brand for making a mistake if you have a good, if you already have a good sense of trust and a good relationship and a good impression of them.
Absolutely. And I had just mentioned this recently, and I like to talk about some of the books that I read over time, and one of the most recent quotes I was quoting, Vaynerchuk, and I had said in the Thank You Economy that, your social media team or your digital team should be the caring department, he writes. And really, frankly, I mean, the individual CEO of Fortune 50 company should also be the caring department when they enter into and of course, I know that you're a major fan, and I don't want to go too far down this road, but I'm going to launch this anyways. I know you're a major fan of the new U.S. Caring Commander-in-Chief on social media. But I wanted to talk about how politics, and you've managed to dive into politics a little bit here and there, very, very delicately and savvy in the way you've done it. But how do you manage to not erode social capital when you're doing your vlog and you're dropping a little hint there where you sit on the political spectrum, and then you kind of then get back onto maybe the message. How do you manage to remain with your social capital intact and still dive into politics?
Well, I mean, I think anybody, even journalists, have this issue, right? Everybody has a personal bias when it comes to, especially talking about politics, but bias comes into even the most neutral of topics. I think, what is it? The personal is political, everything's political. That's the saying, right? At the end of the day, it really, I like to bring an open mind, an open ear, and a lot of empathy to everything I do, whether it's a video or tweets or just even one-on-one sitting down over coffee. Even if I disagree with the person sitting across from me, I learn more. I gain more by being open to what they're saying and trying to empathize with their point of view. Now, this right now in the political climate is not a very popular point of view, right? So, like, being open is not seen as a positive thing, right? Because there's such a us versus them war going on, and anybody who displays openness or has, in this last little while the political rage is high, has been sort of seen as too empathetic to the other side. Doesn't matter what side you're on. You're seen as sort of a traitor to your quote unquote side. So, I've had to be very cautious about that. And in fact, I think you're referring to the, like it or not, Trump is good at social video that I put out last Sunday.
I am indeed.
I'm not a Trump fan by any means. And I think I make that clear in the video, but I do think that he's used social very well, and he used it to his advantage. And I think it's a big reason why he won. And I think we should all be able to learn from it. But I was very, very afraid hitting publish on that particular video, because even I understand that, that kind of opinion, putting that out into the world could, lead some of my current friends to be upset with me. And sometimes on social, you have to, you pick your battles, of course, but you have to sometimes take a stand. And I think there's going to be a lot of times, especially in the next little while while there's so many divisive topics, that if you don't take a stand, you're almost taking a stand, right? So
I think that's right. I think your silence also speaks volumes in a lot of ways,
sure.
on some level. It's interesting that when I was watching the video, you were speaking about Mayor Naheed Nenshi, and the picture that you had used obviously was with our illustrious Prime Minister Justin Trudeau with his hand on his shoulder and stuff. And so, it's interesting that you're right, on both sides of the political spectrum. Now, it doesn't matter where you reside. There is a lot of anger, that political rage, as you call it, is absolutely right at the surface and ready to explode at any moment. So it's interesting. I mean, we could do a series of shows on this sort of topic, right? But I'd like to get back to a little bit more about you, and talking specifically about. I want to ask you just kind of a random question. Do you remember the first time you met KK?
Oh, goodness. I think it was at Gnome Decks in Seattle.
You remember what year?
Probably 2006.
That's vintage. We're talking about, for our listeners who don't know who KK is, at KK on Twitter and just about everything else. Chris Krug, he gets called just about everything Chris something. But people, his friends know him as also the Kingfisher, as he's out on Galliano Island and posting shots of him pulling massive fish out of the ocean as he goes fishing with his beard about the size of, I don't even know how to describe it. Probably only the guys who've got bigger beards than him are ZZ Top, quite possibly. So when you were at Gnome Decks and you bumped into him in 06, he was taking shots, or what was he doing? Yeah,
he was definitely always had his camera around his neck and was always taking fantastic shots of people. He was one of the, there was a group of people from various different locations back in that day, and Chris was one of them that always were carrying like their DSLRs or their bigger cameras around, and always posting photos. And actually, tying back to Woofy, that was a really amazing time because of the people that were adding that kind of value to the community, right? Taking shots of everybody and documenting this really exciting time, and quite often taking really great shots that people would use as their avatar photos up to the event, became really the centers of these communities, right? Everybody knew KK and he had this great icebreaker with his camera. He could come up to you and take a shot of you. I mean, I don't think he has any problems with confidence and not just walking up to people, but it is a great icebreaker. And I think there's a lot of people like Scott Beale, Laughing Squid was one of them as well. Ken Young there was a whole bunch of really amazing people that that they were the official photographers of Web 2.0. I'm doing air quotes right now.
Right. I remember I was in Banff, and my team and I were there to stream live from the World Media show. And every year, right, all the media gathers in Banff, and so here's this guy walking through the parking lot at the Banff Springs Hotel, and he's got his hoodie up, and he's looking almost a little devious, but he's walking with this camera and stuff, and just happened to be walking through, and he's like, and he did exactly what you just said. He just went, right, and I went, hey, wait a minute. And I talked to him, right? And I said, hey, what's going on? And so we struck up a conversation, and from that, it's been a lot of fun. We would touch base in person in Austin, and I remember last year, it was last year, it was about this time, actually, a year ago, I got onto Skype with him, and I said, Chris, I'm just thinking out loud here, and I want to ask you, what are some of the things you think, I could do or should do? And I try to get outside of my head as much as I possibly can. Like I would call you up and say, okay, Tara, what should I do? Right. And just get you to throw something at me so that it could spur on some inspiration. And so he said, you know what, just start creating some content. You used to create a lot of content, and you kind of stopped. So just get back into it, whatever inspires you. And so it's taken me a while, but this podcast is due largely to his comments back then. And so I want to give him a shout out and for his inspiration and helping me, get back into creating some original and hopefully very valuable stuff. Who do you, when you think and you look around out there, you've been around in the tech sector for so long, why do you think, I'll get back to the who question in a minute. Sorry. Why do you think your dad started giving you computer magazines when you were just a little girl?
Honestly, my dad he's a adventurous, he likes all the latest gadgets and things, and I think he wanted to share it with us kids, and I was definitely the most interested of my brother and I in this world. So I think that made him very happy. So I don't think there was any sort of, I want to share, my daughter to create future engineer, but maybe he did. But it was more that he saw that I was interested in the same thing that he was.
And of course, now that sent you down a road of really being, very savvy as it relates to technology, hardware, software. But when you got into university, you were originally pursuing, computer sciences, and you recognized that from the perspective of being a woman in that lab, that it was more difficult than it needed to be simply because of gender. Do you still find that exists? I mean, I think this is kind of an obvious question, I suppose, but do you still experience that kind of environment when you're out in the world today?
Well, there's still the assumption, because I'm a woman, that I'm not as technical. And I've worked with other men who are at the same technical level as I am, we're not coders, but we totally understand what's going on in the background. We can speak the language. We can be that sort of bridge between the developers and the rest of the marketing team or the rest of the business unit. And it's usually assumed that my male counterpart that's sitting with me is a developer and that I am non-technical. So that continues. And there's a lot of, and I don't want to be like, he knows as little as I do. I don't want to be that person. But I have to somehow perform and sound smarter and sound more knowledgeable than my male counterpart. So I don't think that's going to go away any day soon. Bias and assumptions, as human beings, our brains, categorize. And we categorize based on stereotypes. and it might take a few generations to break those stereotypes, right? So it's the burden, I guess, one bears for, this generation to make sure we make it a little better for the next generation after that. But there's not as bad of, from my experience. I know that, we have Gamergate and everything else out there that would maybe prove otherwise. But from my experience, I found like when I step up, that very quickly that bias fades away and that we can all operate on the same level,
Yeah. I have, my wife and I have 4 girls, and I spend a tremendous amount of my time wanting to and doing and looking to empower them as much as possible in all sorts of ways. And I think that it has to be something that parents do more, boys and girls alike, but they have to empower their children, but especially I think in a lot of ways girls, because you're right. I mean, they have to have just a little bit thicker skin. They have to think a little bit faster. I was on air the other day and I had, it came up and I said, look, you know what? I'm just this dude on this panel. I'm dressed kind of casually today, but Shauna Randolph, the host of the show, has to always dress impeccably, not only because she's the host, but also, and it's not because Michael Higgins, the male counterpart host, doesn't have to dress nice. He wears a suit, right? And every day he wears a suit, right? But if Shauna showed up and maybe like Hillary in the same pantsuit sort of every day, I mean, she owns pantsuits, but I mean, you have to dress nice. You have to present yourself in a certain way that I think, obviously in some levels may be unfair. And so certainly having to prove yourself just knowledge base wise, I mean, we all have to do it on some level in front of clients, but, the fact that you have to do extra just because is unfair. Let's talk a little bit about bologna sandwiches and why they should blow our minds.
Okay. Sure.
Tell the audience, because they don't know the inside joke, tell the audience what you mean by that.
A few years ago, I did a presentation that was, had the title, I think, I'm posting a bologna sandwich and other updates that should blow your mind. I had heard over and over again, the reason that I put this presentation together is because I kept hearing over and over again, especially like in the business marketing world, that, food tweets and cute cat tweets and all that sort of frivolous posting is, not valuable versus, the valuable tweets from a brand, I guess. I'm not sure what
the most recent infographic or something.
Yeah, exactly. Like that there was some sort of value placed on somebody posting about their lunch versus somebody posting, about like the latest scientific discovery. And so, my presentation was like, that's total BS. The way that we connect as human beings, when we take a picture of the food on our plate, it's not as much frivolous as it's a way that somebody's expressing themselves, right? I'm sharing what I had for lunch because I think A, it says something about me. B, somebody else could see this and, have that tip that great new restaurant down the road has food that they would enjoy. And see, it becomes valuable for the restaurant as well, right? So there is a business, there is like a business bonus as part of that. So it's, for us to put higher value on one form of expression over another. First of all, it's subjective, and second of all, it's judgy, and it has no place in social, because all updates, anytime somebody's expressing themselves, it should be heard on some level. in my opinion.
Yeah. Do you ski?
I used to.
So, how much time in the last, say, 12 months have you spent researching skis, talking about skiing, dreaming about going skiing?
Well, me personally, very little.
Right. Just because at this point in your life, it may not be as relevant for you. So you just don't
Yeah.
spend any time there. But on the way here, just before I did that, I posted on my Instagram account at fusedlogic a picture of the brand new skis that my wife, Erica, won because she filled out a survey after we went to Lake Louise, where I used to work as a ski instructor. And she fills out this survey after our trip, and we end up winning the grand prize. And so she orders a pair of brand new Head Monster 88s for me, and they get delivered, and I'm ecstatic, right? I'm just beside myself. And I just got the new bindings mounted on them yesterday, so I'm all kind of proud. And a whole lot of people, who don't ski, just listened to the last 30 seconds and went, yeah, who cares?
Yeah.
Having said that, though, there's a whole bunch of people who do ski who are going to go, oh, man, Monster 88s, those are wicked, right? And
or people that are thinking about skiing, it looks like fun, have always wanted to try it, but have no idea where to start. In as far as like, what skis should I buy? They just had some valuable information.
They just got a little bit of insight on maybe how to get started. And last year, Erica, my wife from Nova Scotia, her girls never skied before. So we as an instructor, she asked me, she said, would you teach us how to ski? And we said, absolutely, let's go. So ever since now, they just love the sport. But there is that opportunity. You just never know what post, might inspire somebody else to do something different. So you're right. Prejudging is it's something like, wow, yeah, just because I don't like it doesn't mean everybody doesn't like it, right? I mean, there's definitely foodies out there, no doubt about it.
And this is the long tail content that Chris Anderson, I think it was, who talked about it many years ago, was referring to, right? So the ski, whether it's the skis or the bologna sandwich, or I just posted that we bought an adorable little love seat for our adorable little office that we have, and somebody else. Not everybody is out there looking for new skis or for what to have for lunch or a little love seat that fits in their adorable little office, but somebody is, and that content becomes valuable for somebody, and we should not judge the quantity of how many people it's valued by, as much as the quality, like of how it delivers to the people that need that type of content.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said about, I think it's on Brian Solis's book, Engage, somewhere around page 181, something like that. Engage with purpose. And often I think where people complain about this issue is when it's so goofy, random, that there just doesn't seem to be any sort of real soul behind it. That it gets maybe a little frustrating. But when you start talking about those kinds of things that are important to you because you just solved a problem, and that problem is the seating arrangement in your cute little office, a lot of people are up against that issue, more than we probably know, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
That, you probably just solved a problem for somebody. Like, yeah, hey, that's great. Somebody in New Hampshire just found a couch that they can use.
Exactly.
So when you think about being put on lists of being digital influencers and being recognized for both being a woman in the tech sector, but also just being an influencer regardless of gender, how does that make you feel?
Well, I guess, it's always flattering to be put on it's like a gendered list or a non-gendered list. It feels good. But at the same time, I really always step back and think, like, there are lots of people that deserve to be on lists that aren't on lists because they're not as, they're not as outspoken as the people that are on the list, or they're not connected through the networks of the people that are making the list, or they're influential in their own way, but maybe are not in that particular sector. I used to be really very cynical about lists. Now, I think lists are useful as a starting point, and I think they're necessary in some ways. And why I'm saying that is, somebody said to me the other day, imagine a person just now joining Twitter, right? And they don't know where to start, or just now, going to YouTube, like, I got to learn about YouTube, or whatever, in Instagram, any of those networks. And they want to know where to start. Well, it's so overwhelming. And the recommended Twitterers list, or the recommended Instagrammers, are usually pretty like celebrity, big brand kind of recommendations. So they're not necessarily, I don't think they're as interesting as potentially finding somebody who's part of your tribe.
Exactly.
So some of these lists, and as lists have sort of evolved over the years, I've actually been able to find a lot of lists for very niche specific areas. And the reason that I'm personally finding them is because I do a lot of research for my clients. So when I'm trying to find the tribe that my clients most resonate with, will most resonate with their content, I will actually go out and start with one of those lists. So, I have a client who is creating content around mental health, really useful, scientifically driven, really fascinating content. So I went and found lists of mental health YouTubers and Instagrammers and bloggers, and that's where I get to start, and start sort of just, I look at them, then I look at who they're talking with and following, and who's following them and interacting with them. And I start to sort of create this bigger list from that. And I think that, starting with just lists, it's a good starting place for anybody who's like interested in entering a certain community or tribe. That's my new.
Well, Seth Godin is amazing. You keep mentioning tribes, and he is amazing. And I've had the great opportunity to interview him a couple of times. The guy's brilliant. I'm sure you'd agree. You mentioned somebody looking to get just on Twitter for the first time. And I shot back to my moment when I received an email from Hugh McLeod, and it was back in 2006, and he's like, "Hey Walter, hey man, you got to check out this Twitter thing." And he says it's going to be the next big thing. You got to get on it. So I clicked the link and I check it out, and I emailed him back, and I said, "Hugh, come on, man." I said, "Look, there's like 1,000 people on this thing. They're all in Silicon Valley. I don't know any of them, and I'm really busy, right?" And I just said, I don't have time to like talk to just like these geeks, and I don't know them. And he said, yeah, he goes, I hear you, but it's going to continue to grow, and so you should jump on. And so when I tell that story from time to time, everybody kind of comes back. Not everybody, but sometimes I hear, man, you could have been like at W or something, right? Getting the account way back then. So I didn't jump on until 2008, but that was when there was folks locally here in Edmonton that were on and starting to build a community, and so it was interesting. But that goes directly to, you tap into your tribe, right? And and it wasn't Twitter didn't become super relevant to me until my local tribe in Edmonton here really started to get onto it. I remember jumping on to xing.com, which at the time was OpenBC back in 2005, right? And I jumped on there, and I started looking for anybody I could find, locally. And of course it was a European network, and there isn't anybody locally. And so it's interesting. I still get an email every once in a while from that from that profile. But when you think about people who influence you, who are some of the people that come to mind?
Oh, who influences me? Well, I mean, not as like she's not tweeting and posting as much as she used to, but early influences of mine were like Kathy Sierra was a huge early influence of mine. And a lot of what, I don't know if you read her stuff, but like she all talked about behavior and the brain and how customers interact with you and your product and your brand. And a lot of that stuff, she turned me right on to psychology and behavioral economics. Like that stuff then became an obsession of mine because of her. Definitely first and foremost. Nowadays, I mean, another group was the Clutre Manifesto gang. Doc Searles and David Weinberger and Christopher Locke and that crew, and Hugh MacLeod, of course, is his stuff, and Seth Godin, like very early days as well. And what was amazing is the things that were percolating in the back of my mind, which I couldn't really put into words, they put into words. And that was the first sort of finding of my tribe on that side of things. Nowadays I pull inspiration from a lot of different sources. That's the beautiful thing about the web and how populated it is. Like everybody from Caitlin Dewey, who writes an amazing newsletter that does a roundup of basically the best stuff on the web daily. I think it's called something like links I would G-chat you if we were friends. She's from the Wall Street Journal. I think she's like a staff writer there, and it's so great. And I love her sense of humor, and I love the way that she approaches things. She's been a big influence for me. Definitely, now that I've gotten really into YouTube, people like Daryl Eves, and then a channel called Sexy Savvy Social have been influences for me. And then just in general, like Jonah Berger. I don't know if you've read his book Contagious.
No. Oh yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
great book.
Really fantastic.
About viral
book.
videos and viral content.
Yeah, and I've started to read his second book. I mean, Contagious continues to be my Bible, and I just send it to like all my clients when we start to work together. A lot of his work has really inspired me. So
he'd be a great guy to have on the podcast, I think, maybe.
Oh, for sure. I think he would be fantastic. So, but then I get influences from other ends of things. Umair Haque, who's with the Harvard Business Review, who wrote the New Capitalist Manifesto, like on the political sort of economics end of things. So yeah, I mean, I'm influenced by a lot of different people.
Where do you find the time? Because man, I'll tell you, you obviously there's an endless source of influence everywhere, as you just mentioned, and the issue that we all have is we don't have enough time in the world, right? Or
information overload.
Yeah, exactly. That's such a great list. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's awesome. And there's definitely some new ones in there that I want to go check out.
You'll really enjoy Caitlin Dewey's newsletter. It's so things like that I found super valuable because they take all the things that I cannot get to in a day because as you mentioned, it's just so much. And she's so good at boiling it down into the things that I should be focused on, and really great at explaining why. There's other new amazing sources like Quartz and The Skim and other news sources like that really help somebody digest a lot of information in a very short amount of time. And then you can take a deep dive into something that really catches your eye.
Yeah. I was just going to say that the awesome aggregation content saves people a lot of time. You're right. I love that.
Yeah. Somebody asked me like years ago, I think at South by Southwest, like, what's the future of journalism if there's all these people making content and reporting on things? And my answer, and I think we're seeing this now. The future of journalism is the ability to wade through and curate for people's personal interests what is going to be interesting and news for them. And so, apps like the Skim, that's why they're so popular, is because people they want to be informed, they want to be up on the news, but there's just so much out there, so many voices, and the Skim does a brilliant job of boiling that down to what's important now to pay attention to and personalizing it to your taste as well.
Now, I know that we might be remiss in adding to your influencer list your husband Carlos, because
for sure.
I did tweet with him a little bit this morning, trying to see if he had a question that he might want me to ask you. But have you ever collaborated on a project with someone, and it might be Carlos as well? He's a strong digital citizen in his own right, obviously. Is there something that you've collaborated on a specific project that just did not go the way that you had hoped?
Oh gosh,
if so, why?
Actually, just to bring Carlos back in, we collaborate. I bring him on things all the time. I like to say that my focus in my strength is in the content part, the strategy and content, and his strength is in the optimization and audience development side of things. So, we work together really well. And someday, maybe down the road, I'll hire him. That's the joke we have at home. When I could afford him. But then, as far as why different collaborations don't go well, it's usually egos that are involved, where collaborations don't go well, or miscommunications, mismatched set of expectations. I will take full responsibility in some of the collaborations in the past. I'm a very hands-off manager, I guess. So when I'll bring somebody in for something, that person really has to be a huge self-starter and be the one that asks a lot of questions rather than me offering a lot of guidance. So anybody that I've brought in that doesn't work well in that aspect, those collaborations have fallen apart.
Right.
So, so it just, it takes a very specific partnership, I think, to work in collaborations on that side of things. But then also egos tend to come in the way, and I will fully admit to my ego has gotten in the way of things too.
Yeah. Well, but you know what? You've earned your stripes without a doubt. And on so many levels, and so, I think it's okay to be confident. I think you're right. I think egos can often get in the way of what could be a really great melding of the minds and skills.
Yeah, confidence is great, but humility at the end of the day makes for much stronger leadership. So
100%. I agree with that 1,000%. Have you read Don Tapscott's new book, The Blockchain Revolution?
I haven't yet. It's on my Kindle ready to be read. So I will make sure I get to it.
Man, I'll tell you, the blockchain still is an enigma to me. I understand it thanks in large part to Don's explanation, TEDx, presentations and stuff. And if you haven't seen it, by the way, you should go check out his TEDx presentation on the blockchain. It's awesome. But it's interesting. I think it's absolutely changing our world as it relates to security and contracts and stuff. So I think that'll be something absolutely to dive into and check out more. And hopefully we can have Don on the show. I did tweet out this morning that that you scooped him because we just haven't been able to connect and get him on the show schedule-wise and stuff like that, but that you scooped him and were able to get on the show sooner than him. So I know we'll see what he says, if he says anything at all. But one last question for you, and I know you've got to run. What do you think has been one of the toughest life lessons that you've learned that you could go back to when you're a younger, aspiring, maybe university student or just right out in the workforce? You could go back to that that Miss Rogue and tell her?
I think the toughest thing, I mean, and it's very practical, it comes down to money lessons. Like, I think, planning more for the long term than thinking in the short term. I've always been a big risk taker, but sometimes the risks I've taken haven't been so calculated on that side of things. And I think I would be a lot further ahead now to be able to explore more projects that I'm passionate about, now that I'm in my mid-40s. If I had maybe not taken so many financial risks when I was younger. So it's like that whole picking your battles thing, I guess.
Yeah.
Figuring out, having an eye to the long term and being patient, I guess, is part of that as well.
I think that's so important because back then at that age, I remember thinking just living for the day, right? And if you had 20 or 40 bucks in your pocket because you were working a part-time job or something, and you were going to go out party that weekend, and it was history.
Yes.
There was no planning for retirement, at least not in my life, and sounds like maybe similarly in yours. It's interesting because I know that there are audience members of the podcast right now that are in the financial world and various levels. So if you need someone who's amazing, and by the way, you know what? A good friend of mine, his name is Dallas Farrow. His company name is Advico, and I'm giving him a plug here because he has guided me on some ideas related to things like life insurance and disability insurance. And I was recently in a car accident about just over 90 days ago, and I'm still sort of recovering from that. And that's why it come up is because being a business owner, if I don't show up to work in the morning, right, the agency doesn't necessarily function, right? And so it might be the same in your case. The interesting thing is Dallas is talking about, he's one of 70 guys that has his qualifications out of like 6,000 in his area of financial planning and so on. So I give a shout out to not only Dallas for guiding me on this, but just inspire others to look into things like life insurance, disability insurance, and stuff like that. Because if you don't have it, it's too late when you need it. For sure. So just a thing looking back on that. Tara, thank you so much for being on the fusedlogic podcast, Tara. And I know that again, it was a bit of a scheduling, back and forth for us because you're just so busy, which is absolutely fantastic. And I wish you and Carlos all the best, and certainly all the best at your agency. And the books that you've got a book on the go that's maybe shelved, but are you going to get back into it? You got a book on the go?
It's what I'm thinking. I have something that I'm going to publish as an ebook. Hopefully Q1 or Q2. It's not going to be a huge Wolfie Factor type tome. And going self-publishing this time just because I didn't have the greatest experience with publishers. So looking at doing like a Lulu type thing, something that I can just give away when I need to and sell when I need to, sort of thing. More of a lead generation tool than anything, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, especially when you speak and present, I mean, it would be a great tool there, of course. But Seth Godin went that way. Obviously, as you know, I'm sure he went away from publishers, and I mean, this is a 15, 16-time New York Times bestselling author, right? And he's now publishing his own stuff. So it's interesting that you're heading that way. Well, listen, I wish you all the luck with that project. Can't wait to read it when it comes out. Please send me a link, and keep me in the loop on that if you don't mind. Where can over the years now you've had many different website addresses and stuff where you would direct people, but let me help. Where can people go to learn more about what you do?
Well, the central location is always tarahunt.com. So that's nice and simple. my name at my name, first name, my last name .com.
And of course, if they want to follow you on Twitter at Miss Rogue, and most of your social profiles are probably still active at Miss Rogue, right?
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Tara Hunt, thank you again for being on the Fused Logic podcast. Enjoy the very warm and balmy weather out there in Toronto compared to what we're having to deal with here. Thank you again, and we'll see you online sometime.
Thank you, Walter. See you. Bye-bye.
That was Tara Hunt at Miss Rogue. Digital citizen, digital strategist, influencer, and woman about town. Check her out online, as I've mentioned. What a wonderful person and human being, and just a massive, vast volume of experience that we couldn't tap into today that is left unsaid. But, maybe another time somewhere down the road after she publishes something or she's got something, that she wants to explore, we can have her back on the show. The things I learned from this chat with Tara are, things like, for example, do your research. Check out different sources of information and look and seek to learn as much as you possibly can. Remember to protect your social capital. It goes by so quickly when you burn it, but it takes a long time to build it. And it's that one thing that you can't control when you get into the coffee shops and the restaurants and the networking events where somebody says, "Hey, did you know so-and-so? Hey, have you heard that Thomas Braybeck at Octavo Productions is just like the most awesome sound man you'll ever come across? Have you heard that?" Sometimes it's great and sometimes it's not so great. Speaking from experience and being a part of the human tribe, I can speak that this does happen everywhere. So protect your social capital. I'm not joking. I really was reading Engage by Brian Solis. Brian is a prolific author. He is certainly one of the massive influencers out on the web as it relates to digital strategy. Brian looks at the world differently than I think many digital strategists look at the world. And so his kung fu as a digital strategist is very powerful. Go pick up Engaged. I want to give a shout out and a thanks to a former client of Fused Logic at Laurier Mandan at Graphos. We worked together back in, I think it was somewhere around 2002. He'll have to correct me. I think it was about 2002. Worked for his team at Graphos, and they're doing very well today, which I'm really happy to see. As always, I want to thank our audience. Thank you for your feedback, your input, and please head to Facebook and check out Fused Logic, where our podcast is posted. Head to fusedlogic.com and check out the podcast there. You can listen to all the episodes. We're working hard to make sure that we get enough episodes recorded so you can travel either from Edmonton or Calgary to the other city and listen to the Fused Logic podcast all the way there and back. Wishing everyone a Merry Christmas and a happy holiday season. Hope that you get to spend it with some friends and family and get some downtime as well. We might get one more episode before the end of 2016. We may not, and if we don't, please have a wonderful, wonderful holiday. We'll certainly see you in 2017. I'm your host, Walter Schwabe, and remember, you're made to thrive.
Fused Logic. Analytics and engagement evolved.